gentlemen. Welcome to the December 4th meeting of the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council, Parking Authority, Redevelopment Agency meeting. The meeting is now called to order, and the first item of business is a little different than we ordinarily engage in at this time. As you recall, on November 7th, there was an election take place, and that election has now been certified. So before we move forward with the rest of the agenda, the council, in accordance with the California Elections Code, must first consider adoption of a resolution that certifies the November 7th general election and declares the council election results. Any council discussion on this resolution? Seeing no, can I ask for a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved that we adopt the resolution certifying the November 7th election. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been seconded. Further discussion? All in favor, indicate aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Now, with that, the newly electeds should be sworn in. The California Elections Code also requires the swearing in of newly elected town council members, which includes myself, council members Diane McNutt, and council member Mike Wasserman. Jackie Rose, our clerk administrator, will conduct the swearing-in process, and we will stand at our seats, and Ms. Rose will swear us in.
Okay, please raise your right hand, and what I'll do is I'll read this off, and you can say I do or I don't. Do you, Council Member Diane McNutt, Mayor Joe Przynski, and Council Member Mike Wasserman, solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, bear truth, faith, and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. Take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and faithfully discharge the duties upon which you're about to enter.
I do.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. This was, I guess, a little easier transition of power than we've seen in some other agencies or countries these days. Now I'd ask Ms. Rose to call roll.
Council agency members Mike Wasserman.
Here.
Diane McNutt.
Here.
Barbara Spector.
Here.
Steve Glickman.
Here.
And Mayor and Chair Joe Przynski.
Here. The next item on our agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance, and as was begun in Mayor McNutt's term, we have a future leader with us tonight, and I'd like to ask him to come forward, but before he does, I'd like to introduce him. Tonight, Alec Brazier, an 11th grader at Los Gatos High School, will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And as part of our special Future Leaders program, he is here representing the youth of the community, and this program is designed to integrate our local youth into the public process. A little bit about Alec, a recent recipient of the Youth Citizen of the Year Award. He's actively involved in the Red Cross and is an ASB representative to the Los Gatos-Saratoga Joint Union High School District Board. So with that, I'd ask Alec to come forward to the center podium. And shall we all stand for the pledge?
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alec, a token of our esteem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Next on the agenda, we have our closed session report. Mr. Korb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. Council did meet in closed session tonight on two items. One was a conference with its labor negotiator concerning ongoing negotiations with the Town Employees Association, that's TEA. And the other is a conference with its legal counsel concerning anticipated litigation regarding the claim of Shirley Smith. In both cases, direction was given to the negotiator and to yours truly as counsel. No final actions were taken. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Korb. Next on our agenda is the consent items to be acted upon in a single motion. But before we go to consent, just to remind you that hopefully you're all able to obtain a copy of tonight's agenda. And if you've not yet done so, it's on the table out in the foyer. Please also note, as you look through the agenda for tonight, if there are items that you would like to speak to, that in the rows where you sit, there are 10 speaker cards. I'd ask that if you find items that you're very interested in, that you go ahead and fill those speaker cards out as soon as you can and bring them to our clerk on my left to your right up here in front. And that will allow us to proceed appropriately throughout the evening. So now we're going to act on consent items. These are items that would, in effect, be able to be acted on in a single motion unless there's some item that that someone on council or within our audience would like to pull for further discussion. I'd like to just raise one question to the manager, and that's in relationship to the minutes. There are some procedural changes that were recommended in the minutes due to some ordering of the last meeting. Would you comment to that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you brought to our attention that the substance of the minutes would not change. However, the flow of the meeting was not captured accurately on the ceremonial items, so we will correct that administratively for the record.
Okay. Thank you very much. Council, are there any items that any member of council would like to pull from consent? Is there any item that the members of our public would like to pull from consent? Seeing none, then I'm going to ask that we approve the consent calendar in total.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. That brings us to verbal communication. This is an opportunity for members of our public to speak before us on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. And I have two cards for verbal communication. The first is from Ray Davis, who is known as Citizen Ray, and he will speak to public forum. And then Maggie Goodson also has requested to speak to us on this. So, Mr. Davis.
Yes, thank you for double billing, Ray Davis and Citizen Ray. Wow. I never got that from a previous mayor. And nice to see Mr. Wassman right here on my hard right. It was always a bit of a strain, to get him, in view, way down at the end. So it's he's right here, and I know he's always ready to listen. It's fantastic. First comment. I want to tell you right off the bat that in celebration of the re-election of the three incumbents to the City Council, I am going to officially declare a moratorium for the next 2 weeks on Citizen Ray's feet to the coal session, okay? We will have a honeymoon, so to speak, for 2 weeks in recognition of this marvelous event, okay, where the people spoke and you were re-elected. Fantastic. Next, radar signs for the school kids, okay? 3 years ago, that was brought up for funding through the state grant system. It was never happened. So I brought that up just a week ago before the policy committee with Ms. McNutt and Ms. Spector. I said, look, we've got a $2.5 million windfall from the sewer sale. Let's fund out of the general fund the radar signs that work wonderfully for Blossom Hill Elementary, Van Meter, Union Middle School, or Union School, and the Rolling Hills Middle School. And so I just heard through the grapevine that it's in the mill. Wow, am I impressed? Fantastic. Kids first, cars after the kids. Beautiful. Lastly, DeSantis. It was supposed to be heard tonight. Now it's been postponed for 2 or 3 months. Who knows? Maybe it's just going to go away. Who knows? Is that possible? the monster mansion on the mountain may just disappear. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. The next presenter for verbal communications is Maggie Goodson. Maggie.
Hi. I'd like to address the trail that goes from Main Street up to Lexington. I'd like to see if it would be possible to have some garbage cans installed, maybe 2 or 3 of them, since there seems to be quite a bit of garbage along the trail. I just think it would be an asset to beautifying that trail. And then secondly, we've just installed 2 fountains, which are a really great addition to the trail. One of them at the bottom of the trail has been leaking significantly since it became operable, and I'd like to see if somebody can address that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodson. We'll direct our Director of Parks and Public Works to that, and appreciate your being eyes on the ground for us out there. Thank you. That takes us to all of the verbal communication requests. And so the next item on the agenda is public hearings, and we have no public hearings tonight. So other business is what's up next. And other business is item 5. It's the discussion and direction on the use of segways on the Los Gatos Creek Trail in Los Gatos. And anyone in the audience who is interested in speaking to this, item number 5, would you please fill out a speaker card and return it to our clerk up here on my left. And we'll see you when we have the opportunity to hear a brief presentation from the staff. So we have a complete report from staff, and now we're going to hear Mr. Curtis's rendition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Before you is an item which you may care to discuss and offer direction to staff on the use of segways on Los Gatos Creek Trail in Los Gatos. South Bay Segway Company, whose co-owner is here in the audience tonight, has put forward a program where they would use the trail along with other areas of towns for a program for tours and also individual rentals of segways. This program was presented to our Parks Commission. Parks Commission, having seen how the segways worked, offered up a number of recommendations, which I'll come to in a minute. But basically tonight, we offer you the options of considering the idea of taking no action to limit or constrain the use of segways on trails. And inasmuch as segways are considered by the State Vehicle Code as being the same as pedestrians, taking no action would mean that they could operate on the trails as pedestrians operate. The other option, or another option, is to limit the use of segways, much in the manner offered up by the Parks Commission, in which they have suggested that a number of items here that's included in the report, that the segways would not compete with other pre-scheduled events or multi-uses, that they would be used in the afternoon hours, on the weekends anyway, in afternoon hours, that there would be no more than 3 tours per day. Groups would not exceed 15 people in size, and 2 tour guides would be present when there's more than 7 participants in a group. And the guides would be placed front and rear of the tour. That the Segway speed would be limited to 6 miles an hour, and that's something that can be done mechanically with the Segways. And that there would be a probationary period of 9 months to test this and see if it works or not. There were 3 other conditions that were offered up through the work that was done in Campbell by their Parks and Recreation Commission. I think they're probably worth noting if they're going to have any limitations at all. And that would involve the idea of a hold harmless waiver, so that the city would be protected. There would be insurance by the Segway operator, and that we would charge a fee during this 9-month trial period, because we would have to do some analysis on whether this is working or not. That's really what would perhaps a limited use of segways could look like. The third option to you is to simply deny the use of segways on the Creek Trail and possibly other places in town. And some of the considerations for that is the amount of use that the trail gets currently from all sorts of very legitimate users, walkers, joggers, dog walkers. When I was out there today, there were a number of people with their push carts and carriages with their young children. Bicycles, of course. There's a lot of people who do use the trail, and of course, during some of the times of the week, it's very heavily used. So that's a consideration, too, as to whether you would want to deny the use of segways on the trail. So those are the three alternatives that the staff has come up with: no action, limited use, or deny the use. And I know that there's people here in the audience who may wish to speak on this topic, and so I would hold any further remarks or answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, if I could just frame some of the discussion. We do actually have a Parks Commission recommendation that favored some limited use of segways within the parameters that were indicated on our staff report, and also that this is merely discussion and direction tonight to the staff. Okay, we have no actual application at this point. Is that correct? Mr. Korb, would you like to make comment to that?
Well, first of all, yes, you're correct. There is no application currently pending. However, just to understand the lay of the land, because there are no restrictions currently, tours could take place unless they would be such that they constitute a special event that we would have to regulate as such if we could catch it. They could also be operated essentially anywhere in the town without restriction. So to adopt or to direct any form of restriction up to a total prohibition would require that ultimately council take action on an ordinance that would impose limitations or complete prohibitions.
So technically, if we do want to act on this tonight, other than take no action, if we want to act, then we're going to have to move for an ordinance or ordinance language to be developed.
Correct. You'd be giving us direction to bring back an ordinance that would set out whatever limitations you wanted to impose.
And am I correct in understanding right now that there is a prohibition on our trails, on the Los Gatos Creek Trail, specifically related to motorized vehicles?
Yes, there is for motorized vehicles, but this is not considered to be a motorized vehicle.
Yeah, I understand the DMV's definition, okay, but in terms of this, then we will work on that definition as we go through this for tonight. Okay, questions of council for our staff. Diane McNutt.
Thank you. So I just need to have you review for me again just one more time. So currently, segways are permissible on the trail because they are not considered to be motorized vehicles according to the state of California, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that somebody who wants to do a tour, however we choose to define that as a commercial enterprise, does not require any kind of special permit from the town unless we started calling it a special events, and that would have to also be defined. Yes? Or no?
Well, we could define it. Currently, a special event is any event that will have a significant impact on town facilities, town property. So there could be a tour of that sort, but it would have to be of a size significant enough to be classified as such.
Okay, and when I queried Mr. Curtis ahead of time about the Parks Commission discussion, since we don't get transcripts of their meetings like we do with the Planning Commission, whether they had discussed use of individual segways versus tours, my understanding is they really focused on the tours as opposed to individual use. And where I'm getting lost is I don't understand legally how we could say something about tours when tour to me is so hazy as to how you would go about defining that. As soon as you get two or more, then that could be considered a tour, I would think. Mr. Korb, you probably are more in line with the legal opinion on that.
You've just posed an interesting definitional problem that we would have to work on to come up with a restriction that would be specific to tours. And we may define it as something other than that, organized groups led by, individuals of X number of segways or more. But yes, it would be a challenge to come up with a definition.
So if I could just finish up. So just as we go through the discussion and hearing from the public, we have to keep all of these loosey-goosey factors in mind as we try to figure out what we're going to go with this, correct?
That's correct. But
Okay.
again, the important point to remember is the lay of the land currently is that segways can be used anywhere in the town, including on the trails.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McNutt. Councilmember Glickman.
Thank you. Also, question for staff. As I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, these vehicles, segways, are functionally, legally, and operationally similar to the vehicles that some either disabled or people who have mobility issues use, in that they are electric vehicles. And we certainly see a lot of them around. So I guess I would want to ask a similar question to the one that Councilwoman McNutt asked, that if, for example, one of our retirement communities would wish to encourage a group of their residents who use these vehicles to take a trip on the trail, would that be the same as a tour?
Again, you're just pointing out some of the difficulties associated with the definition that we would have to come up with if you wanted to impose some type of restriction. It could be a tour, but you could also set up a permitting process for any tour and set up the qualifications for those permits.
And, Mr. Mayor, if I can ask
Yes.
one follow-up question specifically to that first part. Is there, or could we craft, or would it be appropriate, or is there precedent to define a distinction between what we're calling a Segway and these other mobility and enhancement vehicles that are battery-powered?
I'll say yes. Segways do have a very specific definition in the vehicle code, so it's easy to address segways. It's just a question of distinguishing segways from every other kind of vehicle or disabled assisted device that you would want to exclude from any restrictions.
So if I understand your answer, if a disabled person chose as their vehicle of choice a Segway, we could say, no, you can't use that.
Well, again, just as a quick review, as you already heard me say, segways are allowed. As Mr. Curtis said, they're defined under law as pedestrians. However, the vehicle code does allow cities and counties, of course, to impose restrictions on their use up to complete prohibition. So, yes, no matter who uses Segway, you could restrict it, or you could restrict its use by certain individuals. But of course, it becomes more difficult for us to figure out which individual can use a Segway and which one can't as a regulatory agency. So unfortunately, sometimes those regulations will be a little gross.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. Following up on that, if we are examining vehicles used by the disabled, and if, as some people have suggested, and as Campbell has done, segways are prohibited, and segways are defined in our code, that would simply limit the Segway. Other forms of vehicular traffic used by the disabled would not be barred, correct?
Council can do that in an ordinance, yes.
But if we start right now, the status right now, and then let's say we did as Campbell did, which is bar segways, that wouldn't bar other forms of disabled transportation.
If I understand your question correctly, currently segways are allowed no matter who's using them.
Correct.
You could, under state law, impose a regulation or set of regulations that would completely restrict the use of segways by anybody, but allow the use of other devices to assist the disabled.
But there's no bar on what the disabled can use at this point, is there?
No.
Okay, that's what I want. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Wasserman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess just wanted to throw out there, Mr. Korb, if you can please confirm what we're looking at tonight is the discussion of use of segways on the creek trails, not who can use what, where, et cetera, et cetera. The discussion this evening is, I think, very, very specific in that we're kicking around the idea, is it appropriate or not for segways to be used on the creek trails?
That's the current
Not on
topic.
streets or handicapped people or recreational or whatever, just segways on creek trails.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I would like to follow up on Councilmember Wasserman's comment. I want us to restrict our discussion tonight to what we can actually enact and to the specifics in front of us in this particular item. And again, it's discussion and direction on the use of segways on the Los Gatos Creek Trail in Los Gatos. Other than that, then that is beyond the scope of our discussion for tonight. So with that, are any other questions of staff? Seeing none, then we're going to go to our public. So in no particular order, Alex Coe. Ask Alex to come forward, followed by Tim Schmidt, and then Doug Hamilton. Okay. Alex, first, would you please state your name for the record? You have 3 minutes, and the lights will indicate how you progress. Please feel free not to use all 3 minutes.
Sure.
Okay.
My name is Alex Coe. I'm at 596 Valerie Ruth Court, a resident of Santa Clara.
Would you speak into the mic a little bit,
Sure.
Alex?
My name is Alex Coe. I live at 596 Valerie Ruth Court in Santa Clara. I've been a resident of the South Bay for 11 years now. I'm currently a user of the Segway. I've had a Segway for 3 years now, and I use it for commuting to work several times a week, recreation on trails, as well as in parks. And I also play sports on it. I play Segway polo in Sunnyvale at Ponderosa Park. And in fact, we've actually gotten approval from Sunnyvale Parks and Recreation to use that facility to play Segway polo. I have a few requests for you to consider. First, the distinction between a paid Segway tour and recreational use. I'm here as a owner of a Segway. I'm part of the Bay Area Segway Enthusiast Group, and we have about 70 users in the Bay Area that get together occasionally and discuss Segway-related issues. Secondly, I'd like to request that before you regulate any recreational use, that you consider a few things. First is to understand how they work. There's a U.S. DOT study about characteristics of emerging road and trail users and their safety that's available. And that covers basically the safety of the Segway and how it's designed to be used with pedestrians. Also, I'd like you to know who your users are of the Segways. First off, there aren't that many of them in terms of recreational users around the Bay Area. So if you do any regulations, if there are any concerns regarding the amount of space we take up on trails or on the sidewalks or whatever, there really aren't that many of us to begin with. Most of us are commuters and are environmentally conscious. Segways don't pollute. They're electric. They're very quiet, and they really don't take up very much space. They actually take up less space than a double stroller or even a bicycle when you take into account the full footprint. And there is actually a disabled community that uses Segways. One point to consider for the disabled community is there is a section of the disabled community that can stand but cannot sit down. There are actually a couple in the Bay Area that I know of where they can only stand to get around. They can't sit in a wheelchair, and they have to use a Segway to get around. And lastly, I'd like you to consider the impacts of your decisions on the neighboring cities in the Bay Area and how they will respond to any decisions that you have in Los Gatos. So I'd like you to please consider this issue carefully.
Thank you, Mr. Coe, very much. The next presenter, I'm going to restrict our questions to the individuals making statements tonight if we could, unless it's absolutely essential. We're attempting to get through a number of cards, and I think perhaps at the end we can then readdress those, and if necessary, pull people back up to ask those questions. Tim Schmidt.
My name is Tim Schmidt. Good evening. I'm actually a San Jose resident. I play polo with Alex on a Segway. We've had very little accidents, if any. Nobody's ever been major hurt. I mean, I can attest it's a very safe machine. I'm not only an owner, I actually modify Segways for disabled people that can't use their left hand because you turn with the left hand. So I modify them for people to use on the right. So they're a very versatile, useful device, and I see no reason why they shouldn't be allowed on trails. As Alex said, their footprint is smaller than a bicycle. They can be regulated, as you know, as the speed. There's various keys. So you can use like a yellow key it regulates the speed and actually the amount, how fast it can turn. That's basically all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Doug Hamilton.
Hi, my name is Doug Hamilton. I live at 26 Oak Hill Way, and I have come to urge you to ban the use of segways on the Los Gatos Trail. As you know already, the Campbell Council has done just that. They did have a meeting in October, I think 2 weeks ago, where they actually did finally adopt a ban on the Segway. So they will not be used on that part of the trail. In all deference to Alex and Tim, they're both experts at this. They are not amateurs. They are not the people who will be out on that trail. If you have 15 Segways or 15 tourists and 2 of front and rear guide, you're talking about approximately 100 feet if they're spaced 5 feet apart. So 100 feet of people riding on a device that they don't know how to use. There's children, there's bicyclists, there's, well, you've been out there on Saturday morning, so you know how many people are there. This is also a for-profit operation. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart to teach people how to use Segways. They're in it to make money. And as I understand, I don't think that there's anything else that is on a regular basis operates out there to make money. So, you know, if I have a non-motorized vehicle, can I take it out there and teach people how to use it and make money? Another point, disabled transportation, well, I think that it would be very rare to see 17 wheelchairs in a row out on that trail. Now, maybe it would happen, and I think everybody would understand. But again, that's not the point here. The point is that this is a for-profit. These are people who do not know how to use this device, and it's just too dangerous for the normal public to be on the trail with these devices. There's also a number of places where the trail is very narrow. I understand they say the footprint of this is less than a bicycle, and probably in some ways it is, but it is 22 inches wide. And there are some places where that trail is only maybe 36 inches wide. I think the biggest spot that we found was 44 on one side. So, again, the trail is very narrow. There's poor visibility on the turns. I just think that this is a really bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Dorothy Erickson will be followed by Sequoia Hall and then Egon Jensen.
My name is Dorothy.
Ms. Erickson, will you please pull the microphone down?
I'm sorry.
Okay, very good.
How's that?
Thank you.
My name is Dorothy Erickson. I reside at 15764 Izora Way. I thank you very much for allowing me to speak about the Segways tonight. My husband and I are in our 80s, and we walk the Los Gatos Trail almost every day. We love our trail, and frankly, I'm very frightened to think about sharing the trail with the Segway machines. Not only am I concerned for my welfare, but particularly the little children that you see down there toddling behind their parents or other people. And I was hoping that maybe there would be action, but it looks like no action tonight. But I'm hoping that at the end of your discussions and when you complete all your meetings, that I'm hoping that you, Mayor Persinski, will bang your gavel and announce and proclaim to the citizens of the Los Gatos area that there will be no Segways on the Los Gatos trails. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Erickson. Sequoia Hall, followed by Egan Jensen, as we said, and then I would ask if there's anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to this, please give us your cards at this time. I'm only going to respond to the cards. Mr. Hall.
Hi, my name is Sequoia Hall. Thank you for having me. I'm one of the co-owners of South Bay Segway. And I'd like to just address a few of the things that were brought up and concerns that were raised. First of all, this shouldn't be seen as something that we're breaking ground new in Los Gatos. There are Segway tours operating in every major city in the world. They started in Paris. They operate in San Francisco on their waterfront way right down there. Incredibly busy area. Many pedestrian walkways in Southern California, Chicago, many other parts of the world, many other cities. Why is it considered a pedestrian? The Segway was designed by Dean Kamen, a very noted inventor. He designed the iBot wheelchair, which you would have to figure out how to differentiate the iBot wheelchair from a Segway. If you chose to ban things, you're starting to get quite complex, I think. It's a pedestrian because it goes very slow, and it's very safe in and amongst people. If it bumps into somebody, it doesn't knock them over. It'd be no more than if I walked into somebody. If I ran into somebody, it would actually be less than if I ran into somebody. It is very much a smaller footprint. The Department of Transportation study that Alex Coe cited earlier is something that each one of you should read. It's very informative. These are the best people thinking about this. Safety. The tours around the world speak for that. They've been operating since 2003. You don't hear about massive Segway deaths. It just doesn't happen. Police officers are our primary consumer. That's who we sell the most Segways to. Police officers use them in airports, in crowded areas, all over the world, because they're safe. The regulation of tours, we're fine with regulating us. If we want to charge a concession fee, we'll certainly acquiesce to that. It wasn't brought up earlier. It's something that we're okay with. All of our tours operate on the slow mode of the Segway, which limits it to at the maximum 8 miles an hour. With the new model, the older model will be 6 miles an hour. And that is substantially slower than the runners on the trail, not to mention the bicyclists on the trail. Every user group has conflicts. I'm an elected member to a local agency, and we have user group problems amongst many different people. And we sort through those. We don't ban uses. We figure out how to appropriately interface all the different uses. We do not plan on having a 15-member tour. That's a number that your commission has batted around. Our maximum number is 10. That's how many Segways we have in our fleet. So I think we should, and we're fine if that's a reduced number, makes people feel more comfortable. And we're certainly very much in favor of adopting a probationary period where we operate, people see how safe it is not a dangerous thing, and we go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Egon Jensen is next, and then I have cards from James Griffin, Jeannie Weishahn, and Maggie Goodson, and those are all the cards I've got. So if anyone else in the audience intends to speak to this issue, I'd ask that you forward a card at this time. Mr. Jensen.
And congratulations being re-elected.
Thank you.
Egon Jensen, 182 Lester Lane. I don't use the trail as often as I should. But when I do, I have some difficulties with hearing bicyclists approaching. And unfortunately, we have some bicyclists that does not stick to the speed limit. Now, I am hoping that you will follow the example of Campbell and deny this application. In my opinion, the trail is crowded at some times, quite often, not as often as it should be, but often it is crowded. And adding another element to that trail would be detrimental. So I hope you will deny the application. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. James Griffin.
My name is James Griffin. I reside at 108 Privada Luisita. I've been a resident of Los Gatos for 28 years. My wife and I use the trails 2 to 3 times a week. I urge a denial vote regarding Segways. I am concerned mostly about the children. If you're on the trail, you realize that when more than one person is in a group using the trail, they don't walk single file. They walk side by side. And if you're facing a couple of strollers and children who are walking, recognizing that where the direction a child takes their next step is unpredictable. And I've seen some very near misses with bicycles and children, where children have darted in the wrong direction unpredictably. Not quite as unpredictable as a cat on a leash, but children are unpredictable. I'm concerned also if a Segway leaves the trail, and you are all aware that there is a recent recall because of a software glitch, and you're probably all aware that there is more than one personal injury lawsuit right now involving Segways. I'm concerned also that if one leaves the roadway, let's say goes down an embankment, ends up down in the water, who's going to retrieve it? How do you propose to do that? That's a rather heavy object to drag up a concrete embankment. I'm concerned about particularly, though, number one is personal injury to children. And they are our most vulnerable person on the trail, and they're relying upon us, the adults, to protect them. So I very much urge a vote for denial. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Jeannie Weishan. It's Janine, isn't it?
My name is Janine, Jeanine, Weishan, and I live at 16220 Blossom Hill Road. I've been a resident of Los Gatos since 1969 and active in the community. And my friend and I have been on the trail biking for 15 years now, 5 days a week, and I am so adamantly opposed to having Segways. It's dangerous now as it is. I mean, we don't go on the weekends. The reason we don't go is because usually there are novices on the trail on the weekend, lots of children, and it's a wonderful place for families. But I don't go there on the weekends because of the safety factor. It's very dangerous. I'm a senior citizen. I'm good on my bicycle, but I'm not as agile as a 15-year-old kid. And I'm just very, very concerned. There are blind curves, and you must stay on your right side of the trail. There are dogs. It's almost too congested now, and I would just hate to see another element added. So I would urge you, please, please don't allow this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weishan. And our last card is from Maggie Goodson.
Hi, I'm Maggie Goodson, 18570 Blythewood Drive. Totally against Segways on the trails. I've experienced them, and when they are coming down a trail and there's mothers with their babies in strollers and maybe a couple runners, it gets bogged down, and I think it's dangerous. And I also don't believe that we ought to use our public trails for profit businesses. I urge you not to allow Segways on our trails. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodson. That is the extent of our public comment for tonight. So I'm going to close the public part of this session, and I'd ask council to address any questions either to staff or among ourselves. Anyone would like to start the discussion? Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much. Following on the mayor's request that we let the speakers speak and then direct questions to them after they will have the opportunity, I would direct a question to especially those folks who say, well, I ride a bike on the trail and like to do that, but I don't want these other folks using this different means of transportation, and helping understand a little bit, and I'm going to be very blunt here, why that isn't being just a bit selfish.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Glickman. Other comments? Councilman Wasserman.
Thank you, Mayor Brzezinski. Appreciate everyone who came in and spoke tonight. And kind of what's resonating in my mind is I think about our trails. And the issue today is trails, not streets. For me, it's not even parks right now. It's the trails. It's the narrowness. It's what's already on there. And I've heard several people express, and I've certainly experienced the fact that our trails are often too congested to be easily safe. There's a problem with fast runners. There's a problem with bicycles. Things get too narrow. Kids jump out. Dogs do this. And so for myself, it happens to be Segways tonight, but for myself, to add more complexity or calamity to a situation that is admittedly congested and dangerous at times doesn't seem very prudent. On the one hand, I'm thinking, okay, it's a nature trail. Do we want a mechanical device on a natural trail? No, not. I personally don't, not really. But I approach this 2 or 3 different ways, and when I look at the concerns from our own Parks Commission saying, well, if we do it, they should have insurance and a hold harmless, and we need to limit the speed, and there should be tour guides. Those all seem like reasons for concern. And I don't see why we should intentionally allow something that our own Parks Commission is saying is of such a concern to them that we need to have insurance and limiters and guides, et cetera. I don't see why we're adding this to a situation. So I'm not in favor of allowing segways on our trails for a number of reasons.
Thank you, Councilmember Wasserman. Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you. Let me just kind of take you through my thinking. This has been a real interesting issue to think about, and we certainly have received a lot of emails and calls and comments over the last week and a half since it was announced we were going to be discussing this. First, let's talk about the idea of tours on the trails and using the public trail for private enterprise. Initially, that was of concern to me, and then as I thought it through, there's actually nothing right now that would stop someone to start a business saying, I will take you on a walking tour of Los Gatos Creek Trail for $5 a person. I will take you on a bicycle tour of Los Gatos Creek Trail for $10 a person. I don't think those businesses are going on. They may or may not be, but I don't know. As you could tell from my questions to staff and especially to the attorney, I'm very concerned about how we would try to put any limits on tours. How do you define a tour? Why this particular business as opposed to another one that might come along? I just see all kinds of problems. So I don't think that we can have a conversation this evening that talks about putting restrictions on the use of segways in tours. So that means that we need to have a conversation about the use of segways in any fashion on the trails. When I have gone on the trail, I only took my dog out there once. He's a little bit of a free spirit and does not really like to stay right by my side. And it was a horrifying experience because of the bicycles in particular. They are so very quiet, and they come up behind you at 15 miles per hour, and, you know, he's off here and he's off there. And as you say, you know, he is like a child, and he's likely to go almost anywhere. So he doesn't go there anymore. So, you know, there are already dangers there because of the crowding and because of the bicycles. So then I say to myself, well, are segways any different? And I guess in my mind it is, and I don't have the cards in front of me anymore since I'm not in the center seat, so I don't remember the lady's name, but she referred to it as a machine. And I thought that was really a good terminology, because for me that would be the difference. I do think of it as a machine as opposed to a bicycle, which is self-propelled, even though a bicycle can go much faster and cause just as much or greater harm. So where I'm at is that if we are going to do any limits this evening or direct staff to do any limits, we don't need to be talking about tours, because I don't think legally we can carve that out in any way that makes sense. But we do need to talk about segways, and as much as I hate to restrict any kind of options for people, I do think that on the trail, which is supposed to be a place of natural beauty and respite, that segways is not appropriate. I think they have other options on sidewalks and in other parts of the community.
Thank you, Councilmember McNutt. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, the trail is about a stone's throw from my home, and so I'm very familiar with it. I walk my dog on the trail. I walk on the trail. I run on the trail. My husband and I bicycle on the trail. I've also operated a Segway. Not very well, but I did operate it, and I learned how to maneuver it in a fairly short amount of time. But I can also say that intuitively, in any emergency situation, I would need a lot more practice than just learning how to operate it. And that is of concern to me, that if segways are on the trail, that even though we may intuitively know how to put on our brakes if we're running or walking or riding a bicycle, we may not know how to do that when we're operating a Segway. I also feel as though when we use the trail, when I use the trail, when you use the trail, we are using that trail because it's in nature and because that it is giving us exercise. And I also believe that the Segway is inconsistent with both of those objectives. I hadn't really thought about it before we got, and I should say we received, I think, a few dozen emails on this issue. And all but 2 of the ones that I received were opposed to the Segway. And one of the things that those emails brought to my attention was the fact that if we're talking about a tour, then you have a whole line of those Segways. And so I think somebody characterized it as a snake of Segways. And I already know, as many of you brought out, that it is a problem on the trail when you're going around the tight corners to deal with anything where you have, whether it's 12 people or 15 people plus 2 tour guides, that is a difficult obstruction with which to work around. I think that former mayor, I was going to call her Mayor McNutt, former Mayor McNutt made a real good point when she pointed out that are we really dealing with the issue of tour, and that could be a very difficult definition problem. So given all of the input that we had this evening, that we've received in emails, and that I have personally experienced, I would be opposed to Segways on the trail also.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Spector. Other comments? Councilmember Glickman.
Thank you. It looks like I'm going to be the dissident voice again. The overall sense that I get, and I came here wanting to hear what people were going to tell us, thinking that I would get some input that would change or reinforce some of the thoughts that I had as I read the material that was presented to us. And the sense that I'm getting, and I also refer to some of the emails that I get, and I think it's worth keeping in mind that a dozen emails does not represent 30,000 people, that there's a resistance to something newfangled. We have bicycles on the trail that go, as everybody recognizes, a great deal faster than a Segway ever could. We have inline skaters that go faster. So I say, well, should we ban bicycles? And I rather suspect from some of the folks I heard tonight that they might like us to do that. But I would like to, and I heard people say, well, it'll encourage more people to use the trail. And I think that's a good thing. I thought we were trying to encourage alternate means of transportation to get people out of their cars and off our congested roads, because our trails can not only be used for the pleasure of walking, of the nature experience, they can be used to commute, especially now that we have a connection to the light rail in Campbell. So I recognize that there are folks who will intend to use these devices either because, due to some physical limitation, they have to use some sort of mobility device to get around, or people who just plain enjoy it. And I really struggle when I hear one group, and I think I heard a speaker address this, who said, well, we want it for ourselves, and we don't want these other folks who use it differently to use it. And that's not a point of view that I find myself in a great deal of sympathy with. So then the question was, well, okay, are these things inherently dangerous? Because if they are, never mind whether people would like to use them, they're dangerous. Well, they're not more dangerous than a bicycle. They're newer. And I heard some of the council members say, well, people aren't as used to using them. well, they're probably going to get used to using them. And I rather suspect that if we take the action, and I think I see the majority going in that direction, that in some period of time when these things become more popular, we'll revisit it. But it would be an opportunity. I would like to see more people use our trails. And if this is a mechanism for encouraging folks to, who otherwise might not have because they're not inclined to travel relatively long distances on foot, that's a step backwards. And finally, I did a little bit of research on sort of the history of things like this, because I remember what I thought was an urban legend, which was that when motor cars were first introduced, that there were laws that required a fellow to walk out in front of them with a red flag. And I thought that was an urban legend. It isn't. That's the British Railroad Act of 1865, which said it required exactly that and pretty much killed the development of motor vehicles in Britain, and they lost the initiative to France, Germany, and the United States. And I would not like to see us take a reflexively anti-newfangled thing attitude, because I'd like this community to be perceived as being progressive in these matters. So even though it looks like I'm going to be, as I said, the minority voice, I would encourage their use. As far as tours go, I think that the mayor is probably, the recent mayor is correct that we can't make that distinction. But the other thing is that if we try to craft some legislation, these things, as far as I can tell, are operationally, legally, and with respect to the town attorney said, I don't agree with him, not reasonably distinguishable from other electric motorized vehicles that are used by, frequently used by the disabled community. And I would certainly not wish to discourage people who need mobility assistance and say, well, if you can't walk or ride a bike or skate in inline skates, you can't have the pleasure of using our creek trail or the convenience. So I would not be in favor of these restrictions, and that's where I stand. Thank you very much.
Councilman Wasserman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Przynski. One thing I have to point out, seems to be a majority here, and of that majority, I'm very proud that the action that seems to be being taken is progressive and is responsible. It's been said in a couple of different ways that Segways are not more dangerous than a bicycle. Well, to me, that sounds like an admission that there's a potential danger in Segways. And frankly, anything besides walking, anything is more dangerous than walking. And I think as a council, we have the opportunity here to say we don't want to add danger to our trail. Today it's Segways. I don't know what it'll be in 6 months, but we have the opportunity here to say we have some concerns on our trails. Our trails are natural, as Vice Mayor, Spector said. They're natural. They're used for exercise. And to intentionally allow something that we're limiting the speed on, needing to hold harmless, needing insurance for, onto the trail seems irresponsible. So I'm very proud of the direction that I think is going to be taken, where we're assertively saying we're taking steps to make our trail, to not increase the dangers on our trail, I guess is what I'm saying. I think we should be proud of what we're doing.
Thank you, Councilman Wasserman. My comments will be with the majority tonight. First of all, I don't think that Segways are newfangled. They've been around for a while. I remember seeing them tested years ago. And as pointed out by one of the speakers, they have not really taken off in the valley. There's not a huge population of Segway users that are out there right now. But I did not hear an anti-newfangled idea response from our community. What I heard was we've got a trail that's well used, and we don't want to intensify that use beyond the current status. As far as encouraging others to use the trails, of course. My concern is that the more we include uses on the trail, we might actually discourage use. We might actually discourage the walkers because they've been overwhelmed by people on segways or been overwhelmed by the inline bike racers who have decided they're going to use the trail and who are in violation of our speed limits. I'd hate to see the parents with their kids in their strollers no longer able to use the trail because they can't tell when they're coming around the bend as it goes underneath the Highway 85 bridge that there may be someone coming down the hill towards them that can't stop. And I don't care what vehicle is being used. For my purposes, I think that it's very appropriate that we look at what our obligations are as a council. We look at the use of the trail as it exists today and how obviously within our community that use is celebrated because of the fact that we have so many of our citizens who partake of this resource that is an extraordinary resource. I know from a number of my friends who work downtown San Jose, they ride their bicycle down the trail to the light rail station to get to downtown San Jose. They're very much oriented towards the ecology of the environment. And as far as this additional use goes, I think that we have an opportunity tonight to say we can control this particular use in this particular segment of the community at this particular time. And with that, then, I'd ask, I think, is it sufficient to hear what the council has said, Mr. Korb, or would you like a motion?
You're not required to make a motion. What this item is asking is for council to give whatever direction you wish to us, and what I've heard thus far from council is a majority interest in prohibiting the use of segways on the trail. If I'm incorrect, please tell me so.
Okay.
But otherwise, that means, as we've said in the report, that we'll have to bring out an ordinance back.
Okay. Is there any comment that any council member needs to make in relationship to this or any desire to move in this regard? Council Member McNutt.
I think I just got lost in your last sentence. Did you decide you want a motion?
No, I offered you an option.
All right. Well, the option, I'm not going to do a motion then because I don't think we need one, but I would like a comment just to make sure that whatever language you come forward, that of course it will have some accommodation in there for ADA mobility as is legally, morally, and ethically required of us.
Thank you, Councilmember McNutt. Any other comments to be made to assist the attorney in drawing up this ordinance?
Councilmember McNutt already made it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I see no need for a motion. I think the council has given clear direction, and we look forward to the language being developed and brought forth. Thank you very much. This takes us then to the council town manager reports, given that there are no other items on the agenda for tonight. And I first ask, are there any council matters that need to be discussed at this time? And Vice Mayor Spector will speak first.
I just want to thank Jackie Rose over there and all the staff people who put on a great tree lighting ceremony and a great holiday parade on Saturday. So thank you all very much.
Looks like the Vice Mayor stole my thunder on that one. I wanted to make the same comment, but also indicate that staff, all of the staff, including Parks and Public Works, and then the various service organizations in the town really did a yeoman's job in bringing this together. Since we were out at the front of the parade, we got a chance to see all of the behind stage efforts, anxiety, tremendous blood, sweat, and tears out there for the folks in all of the organizations that supported this. And I do want to recommend that we also keep those folks in mind as we commend people for the wonderful beginning of our holiday season. I would also like to let you all know that before the parade, there was a gathering of Eagles at the Hannigan's restaurant, wherein all previous well, what do we call those people? The Grand Marshals, yes. All previous Grand Marshals were invited to come together to be acknowledged and to review the history of the parade and to get a certificate of appreciation from the town. And I must say, standing in that standing room only room, looking around the room, looking at all of the history of the town, it was very gratifying and moving to see what kind of community support we have for this event and, in effect, for all events that we engage in with this community. So to all of those people who may be watching and to all of those people who were participants and also those who worked so diligently to make this last weekend come off so well, congratulations. Any other comments from council? Councilmember Glickman.
Thank you very much. In the spirit of commending our staff, I did want to commend our Chief of Police, who has undertaken and announced an initiative to address the issue of underage alcohol use. And I know he visited a group in Palo Alto, a meeting in Palo Alto with some of our youth commissioners. And I say for myself that I think that that's an excellent idea. And I look forward to working with the chief on that particular issue because it is an important concern of our community.
Thank you, Councilman Glickman. And now the manager has an opportunity to speak.
No issues tonight. Thank you.
Then with that, this meeting is adjourned.